You know that feeling in business when you're working so hard on revenue, just getting more and more in, but the actual profit picture feels fuzzy.
Oh, absolutely. It's a classic situation, especially I think in industries like media localization. Things move so fast.
Right. So much volume, so many projects. It feels easy to lose track of which bits are actually making money and which, well, which might be costing you.
Exactly. It's like, driving flat out, but maybe not noticing the fuel gauge dropping towards empty.
Yeah.
You need to know the underlying health, not just the top speed.
Which is precisely why we're doing this deep dive today. We're looking at something called the whale curve.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds a bit strange, maybe, but think of it less like some complex financial thing and more like, I don't know, a kind of x-ray for your business's profit.
That's a good way to put it. A visual way to see where the real profit engines are and maybe where the leaks are too. It goes way beyond just that top-line revenue number everyone focuses on.
And guiding us through this, we're drawing on insights from Dr. Paolo Fontana. He's got real deep experience in media localization, doesn't he?
Yeah, a serious veteran. Technicolor, SDI Media, His perspective isn't just academic theory. It's based on actually doing this stuff, applying these ideas in the real world in that specific industry context.
So the mission for us today is pretty clear, right? We want to get our heads around what this whale curve actually is,
Yeah.
how you'd use it, and frankly, why it matters so much for understanding profitability, especially in a business with so many moving parts like media localization.
Definitely. And this isn't just, a nice idea. Dr. Fontana made it clear this was actively used, a real tool at a major player like SDI Media.
So it delivered real insights.
Absolutely. Actionable stuff that can genuinely affect the bottom line, not just charts for the sake of charts.
Okay, let's jump right in then. This whale curve, what is the core idea? Can you paint a picture for us?
Sure. So at its heart, the whale curve is a graph. It takes specific bits of your business, could be your customers, maybe the services you offer, or even different languages you work in, and it ranks them
Ranks them how?
by how profitable they are, from the most profitable one right down to the least profitable, or even the ones losing money.
Okay.
And then the key bit is it plots the cumulative profit as you go down that ranked list. So you see how the total profit builds up or sometimes falls away.
Right, I see. And the name whale curve, that head, body, tail analogy, how does that fit in?
Well, the shape the graph often takes.
Huh.
It kind of looks like a whale lying on its side.
Right.
You get this big head at the beginning.
Okay.
That's usually a small number of your units, say your top customers or services, but they generate a huge chunk of your total profit, often surprisingly large.
More than their fair share, so to speak.
Way more. Then you get the long body of a whale. That's the bulk of your customers or services.
Hmm.
They might be moderately profitable, maybe just breaking even. They add a bit, but not dramatically.
And the tail.
The tail. That's usually another smaller group at the very end of the ranking. These are your least profitable or often your loss-making units. They actually drag the cumulative profit line down.
Wow, okay. So just plotting this out for the first time, that must cause a few gasps, right?
Almost always. Yeah, it's a real eye-opener for many businesses. The sheer unevenness of where profit comes from. You typically find like 20% of your customers or services might be driving 150%, maybe even 200% of your reported profit.
Meaning they cover all the losses elsewhere and still provide the final profit number.
Exactly. And then another chunk at the other end is actively eating away at that.
Dr. Fontana mentioned that at SDI Media, they didn't just look at customers, though. They sliced it differently.
They did, and that's really insightful. They looked at it across three key dimensions. First, yes, by customer. Standard stuff, figuring out who your most and least profitable clients are. Super useful for sales, account management,
Makes sense. What else?
Second, they analyze by service. So looking at the profitability translation versus subtitling versus dubbing, QC, mastering, all those different things they offer.
Because the costs involved must be totally different.
Hugely different. Some services might just inherently have better margins. Others might need process improvements or, frankly, better pricing.
Okay, customer service. What was the third angle?
The third was by language, which in media localization is critical. The cost structure for, say, Japanese to English is very different from Spanish to French. Availability of talent, market rates, it all varies.
Right, so understanding profit per language helps with pricing and deciding where to focus resources.
Precisely. It gives you a much richer, multidimensional view of your profitability landscape.
Okay, this is super helpful. We get the what and the why. Let's get into the how. If someone listening wants to actually build one of these curves for their own business, what are the steps? Where do you start?
Right, the practical side. Well, step one, according to Dr. Fontana, is fundamental. Define your unit of analysis. What exactly are you trying to measure the profitability of?
Be specific, you mean?
Yes. Is it customers? Is it services? Is it languages? Maybe even specific projects or project types? You need to be clear on the question you want to answer, because that dictates everything else.
Okay, makes sense. Choose your focus. Then what?
Then, step 2, gather the data. And this is often the heavy lifting. You need 3 key pieces for each unit you define. First, revenue.
That should be fairly straightforward, right? From invoices?
Usually, yes, though you need to make sure it's accurately linked to the right customer, service, or whatever unit you chose. Then you need direct costs.
And for media localization, examples would be?
Things like freelancer payments, linguists, voice artists, that sort of thing. Specific software licenses may be used just for that job. Any cost you can directly tie, without much argument, to delivering that specific service or project for that unit.
Got it. Direct costs. Okay, the third piece is usually the tricky one, isn't it? Indirect costs. Overhead.
Bingo. That's the third piece, and yes, indirect costs, overhead allocation. That's where the real complexity and sometimes debate comes in.
So what kind of costs are we talking about here?
These are your shared costs: project management time, QA staff, sales and marketing budgets, your tech infrastructure, rent, admin support, all the stuff that keeps the business running but isn't tied to one specific job.
And the challenge is how to spread those costs fairly across your unit.
Exactly. You need a logical, consistent way to allocate them. Dr. Fontana mentioned they explored several allocation drivers at SDI.
Like what? What kind of methods did they look at?
Well, they consider things like allocating based on project management hours spent per client or per service type. That's quite intuitive.
Yeah, seems logical.
Using volume metrics, things like word counts for translation, minutes of audio or video processed, maybe just the number of projects handled for a client.
Okay. Different ways to measure activity level.
All right. Another common one is just revenue share. Allocating overhead based on how much revenue each unit brings in, though that has its pros and cons.
I can see how the choice of driver could really change the outcome, the shape of the curve.
It absolutely can. That's a key point. You need to pick drivers that genuinely reflect how those overheads are consumed. Allocating your big tech infrastructure costs based purely on word count might not make sense, for example.
So choosing the right driver is crucial. Any pitfalls to avoid there?
The biggest pitfall is using a driver that's easy to calculate but doesn't actually reflect reality. Like that revenue share example, it might unfairly penalize high-revenue, low-maintenance clients. Consistency is also vital. Choose a method and stick with it so you can compare over time.
And Dr. Fontana mentioned something about activity-based costing, ABC.
Yes, he did. ABC principles can be really helpful here. Activity-based costing tries to get more granular. It identifies the activities that drive costs, like customer support calls or project setup, figures out the cost of those activities, and then allocates costs based on how much each customer or service uses those activities.
So it's a more precise way of linking overheads to what's actually causing them.
Exactly. It can be more complex to set up, but potentially gives a much truer picture of cost.
Okay, so we've defined our unit, gathered revenue, figured out direct costs, and tackled the allocation of indirect costs. What's next in building the curve?
Step 3 is the calculation. Calculate net profitability for each unit. Simple formula, really. Total revenue for the unit minus its direct costs minus its allocated indirect costs.
It gives you the bottom line for each customer or service.
Yep, the true profit contribution.
Yeah.
But as you said, the quality of that number depends entirely on the quality of the data and allocation in the previous steps. Garbage in, garbage out.
Understood. So now we have a profit number for every unit.
Right. So, step 4. Rank by profitability. Just sort your list of units from the highest net profit number down to the lowest, including any that are negative, any losses.
Most profitable at the top, least profitable, or biggest loss maker at the bottom.
Precisely. Then, step 5. Calculate cumulative profit. Start with the profit of the top-ranked unit. Then add the profit, or subtract the loss, of the second unit to that total. Then add the third unit's profit to that running total, and so on, all the way down the list.
So you see how the overall profit accumulates as you add each subsequent unit.
You got it. And that leads directly to the final step, step 6. Visualize with a line chart.
Where the whale finally appears.
Exactly. On the horizontal axis, you plot your rank units. You can show each one individually or maybe group them into percentages like the top 10%, the next 20%, etc.
And the vertical axis.
That's your cumulative profit, the running total you just calculated. Plot that line, and boom, you should see something resembling that characteristic whale curve shape.
Okay, brilliant. We've built the whale. Now, the really important part, reading it. Interpreting that shape, is there a sort of normal or typical look to this curve?
Well, every business is unique, so every curve is slightly different. But yeah, there are definitely common patterns. Dr. Fontana talked about typical percentage ranges for the head, body, and tail, but remember, they're just benchmarks, not hard and fast rules.
Okay, let's break those down. The head, the start of the curve. What does that usually look like?
The head is typically maybe the top 10% to 30% of your units, your best customers, most profitable services, whatever you ranked. But here's the kicker. This small group often generates something like 150% to 300%, sometimes even more, of your company's total net profit.
Wow, so way over 100%, meaning
Meaning this small group is so profitable, it covers all the losses or low profits from elsewhere and delivers your final overall profit number. These are your stars, high revenue relative to the cost of serving them. Maybe they value a niche service you're great at, or their workflow is super efficient for you.
really highlights where the core strength lies. Okay, what about the middle part, the body?
The body is usually the biggest chunk, maybe 50% to 70% of your units. Profitability per unit here is much lower than the head. They might be consistently profitable, but on thinner margins. Or maybe their costs are quite close to their revenue. Cumulatively, they tend to bring the profit line sort of back towards that 100% mark, your overall reported profit.
So they contribute, but not spectacularly, just steady business.
Pretty much. And then you get to the tail.
Right. The part where things might get uncomfortable.
Often, yes. The tail is usually the bottom 10 to 20% of your units, ranked by profit. And these guys are unprofitable. They actively erode the profits generated by the head. On the graph, the cumulative profit line actually starts to dip downwards here.
It goes down.
Yep. Dr. Fontana mentioned this tail can wipe out anywhere from, say, 50% to maybe even 200% of the profit generated by the head. It shows just how much damage unprofitable business can do to your overall result.
And why are they unprofitable usually?
Could be many reasons. Maybe the cost to serve them is just too high. They're complex, demanding. Maybe the pricing was wrong from the start. Unfavorable contract terms. Lots of potential causes.
So that highest point on the curve, just before the tail starts dragging it down, that represents something significant.
Absolutely. That peak is your theoretical maximum profit. It's what your profit would be if you somehow only did business with the profitable units, the head and body, and ditched the tail entirely.
And the difference between that peak and where the curve actually ends up, that's the cost of the tail.
Exactly. It visually quantifies the impact of your loss-making activities. It's incredibly powerful.
It really is. Okay, so you've done the analysis, you've got this visual, you understand the head, body, tail. How do you actually use this, turn these insights into strategy?
Right, because the analysis is only half the battle. The curve needs to drive action. So for the head, those super profitable units, the strategy is clear. Nurture them.
Protect the crown jewels.
Precisely. Strengthen the relationships. Ensure top-notch service. Look for opportunities to do more with them, maybe strategic partnerships. And crucially, figure out why they're so profitable. Can you replicate those conditions elsewhere?
Makes total sense. Amplify what works best. What about the body, the middle ground?
For the body, it's usually about optimization. Can you improve efficiency? Find ways to reduce the cost to serve them through process improvements. Is there scope to review pricing slightly to improve margins? The goal is to gently nudge them towards becoming more like the head.
Fine-tuning, basically.
Yeah, incremental improvements can make a big difference across that large volume of units.
Okay, and now the tricky one, the tail. What actions do you take there? It sounds like you can't just ignore it.
You really can't. For
Yeah.
the tail, you need a serious look at the root causes. Why is this customer, this service, this language unprofitable? Can you fix it?
How?
Well, can you renegotiate terms or pricing? Can you find significant efficiencies in how you deliver the work specifically for them? Maybe just the scope of what you're doing.
But what if you can't fix it?
Then you face tougher questions. Is there a compelling strategic reason to keep this loss-making business? Maybe it's a foot in the door to a new market or a prestigious name for reference.
But if not?
If it's consistently losing money and there's no clear strategic upside, or you've tried to fix it and failed, then, as Dr. Fontana acknowledged, you might have to make the hard decision to, well, transition away from that client or perhaps discontinue that specific unprofitable service offering. It's about protecting the overall health of the business.
Those are difficult conversations, I imagine, but necessary sometimes.
Absolutely. Implementing this kind of analysis at SDI Media, Dr. Fontana said, really was transformative. It gave them clarity they didn't have before.
So it wasn't just an academic exercise. It led to real changes.
Definitely. It allowed for data-driven decisions about where to focus effort, where to invest, where to potentially pull back. It improved profitability and strategic focus significantly. Seeing that typical whale shape helped them frame their own results and act on them.
So the big message here seems to be, especially in a competitive field like media localization, you really need this granular view of profit. It's not a luxury anymore.
I think that's exactly right. It takes effort, no doubt. Getting the data right, getting the cost allocation logical, it's work. But the insights you gain for building a sustainable, genuinely profitable business, invaluable.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. The whale curve, then. It's this incredibly useful lens. It lets you see past just the top-line revenue and understand the real profit drivers and the profit detractors in your business.
Yep. Whether you slice it by customer, by service, by language, or something else relevant to you, it highlights where the value is really being created and where it's potentially being destroyed.
And those insights then feed directly into concrete actions, nurturing the head, optimizing the body, and making smart, sometimes tough decisions about the tail.
Exactly. It moves you from guessing about profitability to knowing, and then acting on that knowledge. It reinforces that critical point.
Yeah.
Not all revenue is created equal. Some is much more valuable to your bottom line than other revenue.
So, a final thought, perhaps, for everyone listening. Maybe start thinking about your own business or even your own area within a larger company. What might your whale curve look like? Which clients, which products, which activities do you suspect might be in your profitable head, which are likely in the break-even body? And maybe more importantly, what might be lurking in that tail, quietly eroding value?
The powerful question to ask yourself.
It really is. Just considering that could spark some really important thinking about where your focus should truly lie. A fascinating tool.